Well into the post-war years, it remained the heart of Black Seattle, both the center of the city's African-American community and the place where African immigrants settled. This was also where the urban crisis of the 1960s hit the hardest. But by the 1980s, the forces of gentrification had moved in, bringing with them middle-class African Americans and a smattering of whites. Yet the area in the 1990s remained understored. Opened in 1998, the Starbucks store features a mural of well-known African American jazz players and attracts a steady stream of Ethiopian-born cab drivers and older African American men from the neighborhood to a rectangular library table in the front. A multiracial cast of businessmen and students sit at the other tables. Unlike the Harlem store, this is a comfortable coffee house with hardwood floors, hanging lights, and cushy couches. On his visits to the 23rd and Jackson store, Schultz walks in shaking hands with workers and nodding at customers. While sitting at a table sipping an espresso, he tells stories to the visiting reporters. Of course, these are edited accounts meant to enhance the brand. The site and what he says matters. He doesn't discuss why it took African American community leaders 2 years to convince him to open the store where he sits, or how the forces of gentrification had been underway long before Starbucks got there. One time, Schultz whisked a British journalist over to the store in his Porsche Cayenne. After they finished their coffee, the chief executive took his guest outside and pointed proudly to the Hollywood video and Walgreens pharmacy in the strip mall behind his coffee shop and pronounced, quote, "After we put this store in, all these other national chains came in." Even as Schultz took credit for the neighborhood's renewal, he didn't say anything to the reporter about race or diversity or why he chose to visit his particular store. But this is not a man, as anyone who has met him will tell you, who acts without thinking. Surely he goes to this racially diverse Starbucks in this historically African American neighborhood to send a message. He wants, it seems, the middle-class consumers reading those newspaper profiles about him to know about Starbucks' connections to urban America. That's why he shows up for the openings of the Magic Johnson stores, even though he rarely comes to any other openings. Every once in a while, though, Schultz does talk directly about his company's urban initiatives. He told a Seattle Times reporter that the partnership with Magic Johnson represented an opportunity for the company to make money. But he also added, quote, in a kind of colonial vernacular, "Most importantly," this is him talking, "it allows us to show some beneficence and give back," end quote. White Americans consistently tell pollsters they aren't prejudiced. In 2005, more than 3/4 of all Americans said they supported integration. A strong majority said that African Americans should be able to live where they want to live and work wherever they can get a job. An even larger number of 18 to 29-year-olds supports the idea of racial and social equality. Over 70% said they would attend a concert where they would be the only person of their race. The same percentage said they would date someone of another race. And 93% of whites under 30 said they would vote for an African American president, although more than half thought this mythical candidate couldn't win. That is, until Barack Obama. In his 2002 study of the creative class, geographer Richard Florida uncovered a deep desire for diversity. Diversity, he writes, of the journalists, university professors, IT specialists, and artists he interviewed, is something they value in all its manifestations. Given a choice to work in a city with a rainbow of different races, or one without, well-educated women and men, he found, will pick the diversity almost every time. They would even take a pay cut. Again and again, he points to Pittsburgh and Cleveland. They are, according to Florida's research, the least diverse big cities in the nation, and have for years been losing MDs and PhDs. If these Rust Belt cities want to grow, Florida recommends, they need to encourage tolerance and diversity. What Florida's research uncovered then was a strong desire for diversity amongst higher earners and multiple degree holders. The cultural and emotional value of diversity crops up in all kinds of places, including at Starbucks. When a wealthy advertising executive with Mayflower ancestry dropped his daughter off for her freshman year at college at a private New England school, he noticed a sad look on her face. "What's wrong?" he asked. She answered, "This place has no diversity." The dad, Michael Gates Gill, didn't understand her. But that was before everything changed. After years of fat paychecks and steady promotions, Gill got laid off. From there, things spiraled out of control for him. Near rock bottom, he needed a job and got one serving coffee at Starbucks. His first supervisor was an African-American woman, a double first for him. He'd never worked for a woman or a person of color before, and he didn't know how to react. He quickly learned, at least according to his happy ending memoir, that there was no one better than her. He confronts his closed-minded, intolerant past in his book. After slinging coffee, he says, for a number of years with young, baggy pants-wearing African-American men, he realizes, over several pages, that they know something, that they aren't bad, and they can perform on the job. Starbucks diversity, he said, saved his life, making him a spiritually richer and morally better person. Gates, it seems, isn't alone in valuing the diversity that can be consumed at Starbucks. Over the last few years, documentarian Andrew Karolenko, not the basketball player, has been making a film about a single Starbucks store in Bethesda, Maryland. Several of his informants told him they liked going to that outlet because they met different kinds of people there, both in line and behind the counter. One said, "We love the diversity of that particular Starbucks and the nifty feel of energy you get the moment you step through the door." Another said, "It's a melting pot bubbling with lively conversation and diverse backgrounds and outlooks." Over the last 20 years, pronouncements about diversity and the appearance of diversity have become telling class markers. Creative class types, college-educated upper middle brows value tolerance and believe in universalism, in the faith that race shouldn't matter in American life anymore. But to show others their allegiance to this creed, again, race matters. Yale University sociologist Eli Anderson noticed this dynamic when he spent a decade living in a racially mixed but still divided network of neighborhoods in West Philadelphia. For many of the whites he interviewed, contacts, his word, with African Americans became, quote, a yardstick with which to measure one's decency and commitment to liberal social values, end quote. Many younger whites he detected assumed that older working class whites were intolerant of blacks, if not outright racist. Embracing black people and black culture then distinguished these 20-ish liberals from the Archie Bunker types of the old neighborhood. By living near African Americans, by listening to African American music, and Starbucks plays a very heavy soundtrack of African American music, whites demonstrated their closeness, again Anderson's words, to blackness, and placed themselves, observes Anderson, quote, on the morally correct side of the continuing struggle for racial equality, end quote. Tolerance, Anderson sums up, was the prize. People looked to tolerance, he writes, to be their mark of status. That's what people were judged on, their openness to not closing themselves off. Brian Lowry studies race and psychology and noted similar patterns of race not mattering and race mattering in his research. All groups, the Stanford University Business School professor told me, yearn for a positive self-image. But this is easier said than done. His data show that some persistent anxieties and contradictions lie behind the upper middle class desire for diversity and tolerance. In an era of supposed colorblindness, most better educated whites want to be seen as tolerant of racial diversity, even as people who value diversity. Still, most, Lowry explained, recognize the lingering inequities of race in America. And many whites, he found, feel a sense of guilt over these inequities. To relieve this guilt, some whites, Lowry notes, look for ways to help, his word, African Americans. They donate money to the United Negro College Fund, or the NAACP, or some other urban-based charity. They befriend a black man or woman, or invite a person of color they don't know very well, again this is his research, to a party, and buy the CDs of African American musicians and cheer for black athletes.